Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is Gunbillion!
This feels fucking awesome.
And Portland can't say shit!
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
Villa Vega! Oocha Magooch! All creatures great and small! Villa Vega!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Come seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Hacks and Ferments, and our subscribers. We're recording on Tuesday, August 12, 2025. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our producer, Lickett. Another game, another impressive showing, despite missing some key players. The Sounders ran their unbeaten streak to 10 games, which includes 7 in league play, with a 4-0 win over the Galaxy on Sunday, and it probably wasn't even that close. Even with the news today that Albert Rusnak is probably out 3 to 4 weeks and Ryan Kent might be done for the season, I can't help but feel optimistic. How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I think it's impossible not to. I mean, the Sounders have been without Jordan Morris most of the season. They've had other, key injuries pretty much consistently throughout the year. Yamar's missed a ton of time. Jackson Reagan missed time. I'm absolutely going to forget people if I keep naming names, so I'm just going to stop there. But
I think you could go through the roster, and I don't know how many players. If you look at their best 11 on the first part of the season, at the beginning of the season, I want to say Jesus Ferreira, who wasn't necessarily even in their best 11, and maybe Pedro. I'm trying to think if Pedro I guess he did have an injury at one point. So Ferreira might be the only. Oh, Alex. I guess Alex has been healthy all year. So, you've got, sorry. There's a few. Obed, Christian, Alex, Ferreira, De La Vega for the most part. Those players have been pretty much healthy. Everyone else basically has been hurt for, we had this crisis where we were starting Alex Roldan at center back because there were so many injuries at center back. We have had, backup, João Paulo goes out. Paul Arriola, obviously the beginning of the season. It's a rather long list. Stephen Fry currently is still coming back from injury. It's a long list of injuries that seemingly would have sunk almost any team. And if they had sunk the Sounders, I think we would be sitting here saying, well, no MLS team can overcome this sort of injury crisis.
Right.
And yet here we are.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's, I think at the beginning of the season, we felt pretty good about the depth in most places. But the general consensus, I think, was, well, if something happens to Jordan Morris, it's going to be pretty tough for this team.
It's going to be tough. Yeah.
And it was for a little bit. But I think that they have figured out a way to be dangerous with pretty much any collection of attacking players they have on the field. I mean, we've seen Danny Musovski, obviously. He has 12 goals all comps, I believe, 10 in MLS.
Yes.
He's been great, and I don't want to take anything away from him because he's earned those goals. I don't think that they could have put Osaze de Rosario there and had him get 10 goals. But he hasn't been the only guy stepping up. Osaze has stepped up when he's had the opportunity. Pedro de la Vega has started chipping in goals. Rusnak has had a ton of goals. He's hurt now, obviously, so that's a problem. But that's 10 goals you've gotten from midfield. It's just been such a team effort. Everybody has been contributing to goal scoring opportunities. I mean, so many of the goals they've scored over this run since the Club World Cup have been sort of end-to-end sequences that have required great attacking play from pretty much everybody on the pitch. And I don't recall. I think historically, the 2014 team, specifically, that sort of summertime run that they went on, where they had Oba, they had Clint, and they really started clicking. I think that's sort of been historically the hallmark for that's the most fun the Sounders have ever been. I think this team is more fun than that, man. I really do, because it's not. There's something really cool and exciting and fun about watching two dudes just go out and kind of street ball their way to a bunch of goals. That's a blast. Not trying to take anything away from that. But this Sounders team is just systemically so dangerous. They just cut teams apart so methodically and so clinically. And it's just so much fun to watch. Teams just cannot deal with them. I mean, how many opportunities against the Galaxy did they have where the center backs are just look completely lost on every play because there are runners coming in from everywhere. Multiple people are making intelligent runs. The Tijuana game, another great example of that. We talked about that game last week, obviously, but just teams looking completely overwhelmed, and not because there's this huge, massive talent gap, although the Sounders certainly have a lot of attacking talent, but because everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They are committed to going forward, to go in at goal in a way that I just don't remember them ever being, especially in the Brian Schmetzer era. I've just never seen a Sounders team this attack-minded and confident in attack, and it's pretty impressive to watch.
I would agree with all that. Just to give a little bit more context to some of what you said, the Sounders during this 10-game unbeaten streak, they have scored 29 goals. 26 of those goals have come in their last 8, which is a record, a franchise record for the most goals in a 8-game stretch. I believe the previous record was like 23 or 24 or something like that. That 2014 team did, and that run famously included a 6-0 win over the Chicago Fire at Starfire in the Open Cup semifinals. So that kind of almost like a little asterisk on that one. But I guess maybe you could say that with Leagues Cup. I don't know. To me, I think doing it against Liga MX teams is a little different. But anyway, there's been 11 different goal scorers. There's been 18 different field player starters. And of those 18 field players, I believe only 3 have not scored or assisted during this 10-game stretch, which is to say, and they're, it's all defenders. It's Kim, John Bell, and Reed Baker Whiting, I think, are the only 3 players who have not scored or assisted, starters who have scored or haven't scored or assisted. It's just up and down the lineup. They're getting production from players who I think we thought could be productive, but hadn't necessarily shown a track record of being as productive as they're being, at least right now. And I think what's so encouraging about this is that it's not one player getting on a heater. It's a bunch of guys just feeling confident and vibing on one another and doing the stuff that you need to do. Another stat I recently looked up and I think is illustrative. So, they have this big scoring surge. That's great. You want to know how sustainable it is. Well, part of what I think makes it sustainable is that they've essentially doubled the number of big chances they're creating according to Opta. So they're creating 4.7 big chances per game during this 10-game unbeaten streak. Before the Club World Cup, they're producing like 2.2 big chances per game. And so the fact that they're scoring, a lot, they're scoring a lot more is in part because they're just creating a lot more chances. It's not like they're just on a hot streak. They're getting own goals. There's a couple penalties in there, but it's mostly goals that are, like you look at this last game and the first goal is an own goal, but the own goal comes on the 21st pass of the sequence. And it's just them and all 21 passes were in the Galaxy defensive end. And then they get a goal. The second goal is a turnover that they convert into a chance, and then they the third goal, I believe, was another turnover that they converted into a chance, and then the fourth goal again is a turnover that they convert into a chance. And these are just repeatable things that they're doing. That's what's, I think, so much fun about this.
Right. I think I'm glad you pointed out that they're scoring goals off of turnovers, because that was a talking point earlier in the season. I think Mark Kastner made that point on the show. I can't remember whether it was on the show or
we've talked about it though, for sure. Yeah,
where basically the Sounders were a really effective pressing team, and they were not turning that effectiveness and press into goals. Well, they've certainly started turning that effectiveness in the press into goals now. Like they have figured out how to integrate those two sides of their game. And I think that I don't think that this level of goal scoring is sustainable long term. They are averaging, I think, just in MLS play, not in the Leagues Cup. So that's taking 9 more goals in 3 games off the table. But just in MLS play since the Club World Cup, they're averaging, I think it was 2.87 goals per game.
2.9. Well, 2. Because they have 29 goals.
So basically a pace of like, I think 87 goals over a full season,
right?
Which would be a new record in MLS. And the current record is held by the 98 Galaxy with 85. And I think as anybody who watched MLS in 1998 knows, it's not the same sport as is being played currently. So I don't think that is sustainable for the long term. But nothing about the proof of concept, right? About the way that they're playing, about the way they're creating chances, nothing about that seems unrepeatable. And I think they have found a system. They've found a way of playing that works for them, that works for the team, no matter who's on the pitch. I had major concerns about the impact on the Sounders' style of play with Jesus Ferreira or Danny Leyva, because at the time we didn't know. Sliding in for Albert Rusnak, because I thought, hey, I think Jesus is a good 10. I think Danny Leyva is a good 10, but they play much differently than Albert. And I still think that they do, but it's not really that big of a difference, because the system just works. And, if you look at their underlying numbers, they've scored 41 in MLS play this year. Their XG is 39.8. So it's not like they're actually underperforming their XG. They're getting a lot of easy chances that are created by repeatable patterns of play. And that's the difference between a team that's putting up gaudy numbers that is just getting a bunch of fluky goals over a short period of time, and a team that is actually a really potent attacking team that, okay, maybe they can't do this over the long haul, but they can certainly be a good attacking team over the long haul.
Absolutely. It's and I think one of the other things I like about this is they aren't getting a ton of goals from set pieces either. And I feel like set pieces are, I think that was one of the things that last year maybe masked some of their offensive struggles, was that they scored a bunch of set piece goals. They ended up finishing on, I think, 51 goals last year, which at the time felt like a significant step forward, because they had really struggled the season before. I think they're on the verge actually of tying the number of goals they had in 2023 already this year. And then last year, the big difference between 2023 and 2024 was just they scored a bunch of set piece goals at the end of the season, which, set piece goals count just the same. And there is something repeatable about set piece goals, but I also feel like set piece goals can be a little bit more fickle in terms of your ability to convert them, because it's like we have long sample sizes about set pieces, and it just, the reality is that teams tend to sort of finish at a certain rate within a range of a rate. And yes, there are examples of teams overperforming that, but it's just not usually the most sustainable way to produce a ton of offense. And the Sounders aren't getting, at least in league play, they aren't getting a ton of set piece goals. Now, they have shown in Leagues Cup that they have that capability. So that's encouraging that it's in their bag. But man, in this game in particular, I think it's worth talking a little bit about sort of the Danny Musovski phenomenon, because I do think he is sort of illustrative of what is going right with the Sounders right now. And this is a player who doesn't do a lot of stuff that's fancy. He just gets himself into really dangerous spots all the time. And he has a nose. He just sort of has a nose for goal. Both of his goals in this game were rebounds. Both of them were off of his own rebound, which is just kind of a funny little, or no, I guess one of them was not. Sorry. The second one was off a Jesus Ferreira rebound. But point being, he's just really good at putting himself in dangerous spots, especially on rebounds. I need to go back and look, but I feel like that's probably the fourth or fifth goal he scored this year off of a rebound. And, you just don't see a ton of that. And it's great, but it's great to see because it does feel like something you can coach.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that putting the ball on target in those situations is an important thing to be able to do. And I think a lot of the time in the past, maybe we've seen Sounders forwards who are missing wide, missing high, just missing the goal, right? So they're not giving themselves those opportunities to get those rebound goals. And I think that's been something they've been a little better at this year. I don't have numbers to back that up. It just seems intuitively true. So maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think following up opportunities, the Sounders are taking a lot more shots this year than I think I've ever seen them take. And they're getting runners in the area. Danny Musovski is getting into really good spots. I've said a couple of times that I think his off-ball movement is as good as anybody on the team and better, I think, honestly, than anyone else on the team. And I think that a lot of that is being able to read where is this rebound likely to fall, and putting himself in a position to clean up those opportunities, following up his own shots, and making keepers work for it. I think that that's just a critical thing. I don't think finishing is real, first off, but I don't think Danny Musovski is some kind of elite, otherworldly finisher. I think he just puts the ball on target and doesn't give up on lost causes and knows where to be. And those are the most important things, I think, for a goal scorer. And, I just, he's not a guy I think you can necessarily build the team around because he's a poacher. And he's going to score a lot of goals and get into good spots and put up good numbers. But there's a dynamic to Jordan Morris's game that he doesn't have, or to Raul Ruidiaz's game that he doesn't have. But he's going to score goals if he gets the opportunities. And if the team is creating this many chances, he's going to get the opportunities. And that's a valuable thing to have. Like in modern soccer, I think people tend to almost downplay scoring goals, like that's a common criticism. I think you hear a lot of players like this at the highest levels. It's like, well, he's great, but all he does is score goals. That is the objective of the game, right? So yeah, that's a pretty important thing to do, to be able to do.
Yeah, I've used this line a few times. It hasn't landed yet, so I'll use it again on air. But I've been starting to call Danny Musovski Chris Carter, and I don't know if people will get this reference or not. But back in the day, somebody accused, I can't remember who it was. Chris Carter was a very good tight end, or not tight end, a very good wide receiver, spent a lot of time with the Vikings, a few other teams. But at one point, someone accused him of only catching touchdowns, and that sort of became his calling card about how that's all he, like, what a dig. All I do is catch touchdowns.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Anyway, it's just kind of a silly, not silly. I mean, I do think from a perspective of who's the better player between him and Jordan Morris, look, I think there's a reality that Jordan Morris creates a gravity around him. He can pull defenses out of position in ways that Danny Musovski can't. But right now, who cares? Like, right, as long as Danny Musovski is scoring, as long as he's doing the stuff that we need him to be doing, that's great. And again, if it was just him, if he was just on a heater, and that would be of some concern, because you would have to be wondering, how long can Danny Musovski keep this up, right? But that's not what's going on here. Pedro de la Vega, again, he didn't have a goal or an assist, but he could have easily had 2 assists. He has the ball to Paul Rothrock at the back post that ends up getting becoming an own goal. That's a great heavy cross that puts the defender in a really bad position. And then he also has the pass to Ferreira that ends up getting saved and falling to Danny Musovski. That was another great play. But we're also, I think the other thing that I've really liked in the last 4 games, especially, is the defense is finally starting to come around. We before the Club World Cup, I think there was a growing concern that for as much fun as the Sounders were, part of the reason they were so fun was the defense was giving up a bunch of goals, and so we were getting all these high scoring games. But in the last four, they've only given up 2 goals. I wouldn't say that they're fluky goals, but one of them comes at the very end of regulation when they're already up 2-0. And then the other goal comes at the very end of the first half on a golazo right after the Sounders miss a penalty. So they've just been very good defensively, and they were especially good against the Galaxy, and a Galaxy team who I think it's very easy to undersell how, it's easy to overlook because they have been so bad for the most part this year. But really, for the last couple months, the Galaxy have been very respectable. They were just coming off a very impressive performance in the Leagues Cup. And offensively, they had been very solid. And the Sounders had no problem cutting them up.
No, it wasn't close. I mean, the Sounders were under a little pressure early on, but
yeah,
I think it felt like one of those situations where the Galaxy were creating pressure without actually creating pressure, and after the first goal, it was just not a contest. It was the most lopsided XG I've ever seen, I think, in a game. The Sounders on FOTMob ended up with close to 3 goals, 3 XG, and the Galaxy had like 0.25 or something like that. It was just not close. And the thing is that even if the Galaxy are every bit as bad as their record would indicate, which I don't think they are. I think that there's plenty of signs that they've improved a lot over the last month or so. You still have to go to LA and beat them 4-0, and that's just not something the Sounders have made a habit of doing over the years, even at their best. Like typically the woodshedding has taken place in Seattle, even of bad teams, and this was like a Chivas level beatdown. Like the Sounders have not won a game that convincingly in Carson since Chivas USA was still a team. And it was extremely satisfying. There were some folks in the game thread saying, this is a great win, but like it's not a big deal. This is a bad Galaxy team. If you've lived through the entire history of this team at the MLS level, beating the Galaxy is always a big deal, especially if you're doing it in that lopsided of a fashion in Carson. That's just, it feels nothing better. Even beating LAFC doesn't feel as good. I'm not even sure if beating the Timbers, like if we beat the Timbers 4-0 at Providence Park, that probably feels as good as this, but I'm not sure it feels that much better to me, at least personally.
Wow. Okay. Well,
I really hate the Galaxy a lot. So
okay, fair enough. I'm not gonna try to dispute that at all. So just sort of to illustrate your point, though, about I'm sure on this show we have said, look, you don't. I think even we probably said this after the Sporting Kansas City game where they kind of eked out a 3-2 win after blowing a 3-0 lead. Or nearly blowing a 3-0 lead. And I'm sure we said something like, you just don't take road wins for granted in MLS. You just never do. And to sort of illustrate your point here, American Soccer Analysis has a stat that they call expected points. Essentially what they do is they run the simulation of the games, I think basically just based on the XG, and they say how many points each team should expect to get. And, a good result is in the 2s. Like if you are over 2, you have performed very well. Well, the Sounders had 2.83 expected points in this game, which, believe it or not, is actually their season high. That's the best they performed. But going back into the ASA database, that's, I believe, the best road performance of any team in their entire database, and their database goes back to 2013, which is to say road teams don't dominate like the Sounders dominated this game. And I will say that there is a little bit of an anomaly in terms of the XG. When you score off rebounds, that tends to throw off the XG system a little bit because you end up getting credit for both chances And in this game, they had a couple, like at least one of the rebounded shots the original shot had a pretty high XG value. So it's a little inflated, but put that aside, this was as dominant of a road performance as you're going to see in MLS. That's just a flat out truth. You just don't see these kind of performances a lot. The press was working. The offense was working. Again, they made 7 changes. This is a team that made 7 changes from their midweek game, and they just rolled through the Galaxy like they were nothing. And if you look at the Galaxy lineup, it wasn't a bad lineup. They had Gabriel Peck. They had Joseph Paintsill. They had Marco Royce. They had quality players all over the pitch, and it didn't matter. It just didn't matter. And just to kind of, I guess we can kind of, I wanted to throw in one more little nugget from this week, which I thought was fun, is Matt Doyle, who obviously we have on the show pretty regularly. But, I think this means something when he says, I think the Sounders might have the deepest team in MLS history. That I feel like that's not something he's going to say lightly. Now, in the same season, he has also said that Miami might have the best team in MLS history. So, maybe that's, but I don't know, maybe that's where we are in MLS, is that you can have both these things can essentially be true. But he said that, and then he also ranked them number 1 in his power rankings this week, noting that I don't know how long this is going to last, but right now they're the best team in the league. I guess what I'm saying here is let's enjoy this a little bit. They're still only 4th in the table. That is, but they are climbing. And this game against Minnesota is, I think, a real legitimate test. If they can get out of Minnesota, there's a chance where if they win the Minnesota game, I believe they would move into a tie for 3rd. But even if they get a point out of this game, I would think that sets them up really nicely.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Minnesota's a good team. Obviously, I think if you go into Minnesota and you win this game, you've got to feel great. You've got to feel like you've got a very good team, that none of this has been any kind of mirage. Because they would move into a tie. They'd move into a tie with a game in hand.
With a game in hand, exactly.
They'd move to as little as few as 5 points back of San Diego with a game in hand. They'd be just a point back of Vancouver, who has not fallen off a cliff or anything, but looked like legitimate Shield contenders earlier in the year. So to catch up to them would be pretty impressive. With a full 8 games left after this one. So I mean, if you go into Minnesota and you get 3 points, you got to feel like we can finish first in the West. Like we could not even we should, like that should be the goal, is finishing first in the West. That is a realistic target. I don't think they're going to make a run at the Shield, but like if they can get to 44 points with 8 games left, it's at least like you can start maybe kind of sort of dreaming about it. They'd be 7 points back of the current pace. It wouldn't be the craziest thing that's ever happened in the league. It's enough to make it interesting, right?
Definitely enough to make it interesting. I think the challenge with, I tend to think that the teams that are leading the West feel to me a little bit more like they're going to come back a little bit. They're not going to continue the pace that they're on. I mean, the reality is that even if LAFC were to maintain their current pace, they might be able to catch some of these teams. But like the Whitecaps are playing still at 1.8. San Diego is playing at almost 1.9 points per game. That doesn't feel quite sustainable to me. And if the Sounders can get to those points, I think that it's realistic. I think if they win this game against Minnesota, I think finishing first in the West becomes a very realistic aspiration. If not, it's not going to be easy. The Sounders still have to probably get to 64-ish points to really feel like they have a good chance at winning the West. But 64 points from 8 games feels vaguely doable.
Yeah, for sure. It's within the realm of possibility. Absolutely. And I think there's a very real chance that it doesn't take 64 points, right? But I think that you've got to feel like if you get to 64 points, you're going to finish first. One thing I wanted to close the loop on real quick, if I may. 2024, the Sounders had 27 open play goals. So total goals minus penalties and free kicks. You want to take a stab at how many they have in 2025?
All right. So they're
MLS
at 41. Play. Right. So they're at 41. I'm not going to look. I know I'm going to guess they probably have. So are we including our open play goal or our own goals counted? I think they only have one, or they might only have one in league play.
Yeah. All right, anything that's not a penalty or a free kick.
Okay. This is, I'm going to say 32.
That is exactly correct.
Wow. Okay. I did not. I'm almost embarrassed that I guessed that.
So the MLS site has them at 43. FBref has them at 41. So that's a little weird.
I'm sure that's because my guess is that it's because
those are the own goals, aren't they?
Those are the own goals. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So 32 including the own goals, 30 not including the own goals. If you take own goals out of last year, it's 25 open play goals.
Right. Okay.
So no matter how you slice it, they are 5.
The Sounders have already scored more open play goals than they did last year.
Right. With 8 games left. Also, they were a bad offensive team for the first quarter of the season.
Yeah. I feel like that's
maybe creeping into third of the season.
Yeah, so they didn't score their first. They didn't have they had the 5-goal game against LAFC early in the season, but other than that, the Nashville game was the first game where that was sort of where the offensive turnaround really started, and that was if we really want to chart where the season turned, it was that road game in Dallas where they won 1-0, and Danny Musovski got his first goal off of a rebound of a Pedro de la Vega free kick or ball shot off the post. But so that was 2, 4, 6, 7. That was the 8th. That was the 9th game of the season. So the first third of the season, essentially. Fourth.
Yeah. We'll say quarter just because they did, before Jordan got hurt, they had a couple of multi-goal games and all that. So, but still,
they've played. So another way of illustrating this, they played 35 games in all comps this year. They have 65 goals across all competitions. And the only year, and so 35 is obviously one more game than you play in a regular season. And this is now we're getting into we're no longer comparing apples to apples, but I feel like it's illustrative. 35 feels close to 34. The only season they scored more goals than that was in 2014. And so they're not quite at the 2014 pace. If you include own goal or all competition goals, I think they were over 80 that year.
Yeah.
But this is easily, to me, the most complete offensive team they've had.
Right. I mean, the 2014 team was the Oba and Deuce show. Not to take anything away from Marco Papa and Lamar Nagel, but they were solidly the supporting cast. And, the Sounders have been without Jordan Morris for most of the season.
Right.
And, they've had all the other absences. And it's so impressive. It really is I feel like we say this every year, but this might be Ryan Schmetzer's best work yet. Completely overhaul the identity of the team mid-season.
Yeah.
He can't keep getting away with it, man. It's just,
I mean, there's a meme going around there that I saw on Blue Sky where it's someone saying it's just like clock, essentially it sounds like clockwork where, they play the first half of the season and they look mediocre at best. And then they get to July and they just flip a switch and say, all right, time to play for real. And I can only imagine it must be really, really annoying for fans of other teams. Now it's annoying for Sounders fans too, I think, because it does feel like, well, are we really going to go on another second half run? And then they do,
they do.
Admittedly, I don't want to get too cart before the horse, but it is, I can see how annoying it is for everyone involved, but I will say as bits go, it's a good one.
It is. It's a good one. I mean, I think the reality is that it is fine to be pissed off when your team plays like crap for the first couple of months every season.
Right.
It's also fine to enjoy the rest of the season, right? Like you can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we're I guess not at the same time consecutively.
And if I have to choose, we're a big fan of false choices on the show. So if I have to choose between a shitty first half and a strong second half, or a great first half and a shitty second half, I'm definitely going to take the strong second half. This is not a real choice that we have. No one is making us make that choice, but
yeah,
I'll take it. This is
yeah. I mean,
what I'm saying is enjoy this, folks. Enjoy this
for sure. If you're going to get good, this is a good time to get good.
I always say, if it's exactly. As the summer heats, so do the Sounders. But all right, well, I think what we're going to do, we're going to call this a segment. We're going to come back and we're going to do a power ranking of not where we want the Sounders to finish, but where we think plausibly. I guess maybe a better way of doing this is we're gonna take stabs at how we think the Sounders are going to finish the season. We'll take a look at the schedule. We'll kind of break it down. Hopefully that's leads to a little bit of good times. But you're listening to Nos Arietes.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. We are going to do something, we like to have a little bit of fun with these power rankings. And this week, what we're going to do is we're going to rank the most likely finishes for the Sounders, meaning where in the Western Conference table we think is most likely for them to finish. These are obviously not where we want them to finish, but where we think they will finish. And so what we did is we gamed out the results for everybody and we sort of put them in order and how we feel like it's going to work out. And I guess we'll just start by, I think what we're going to do is we're going to start by giving you our predictions and then we're going to talk through it. That's what we decided, Aaron. As opposed to going,
I thought we decided to talk through it and then give predictions, but either way is fine with me.
Okay, no, we can do that. We can do that. So let's talk this through. So let's start. The way the table is setting up right now, the Sounders are in fourth. They are 3 points behind Minnesota in third. They are 4 points behind Vancouver, and they are 8 points behind San Diego. And so San Diego, admittedly, I'm looking at their schedule. They look like they're not necessarily impossible to catch, but they'd have to really fall apart. essentially.
Yeah, I think that the wheels would really have to come off for San Diego.
Yeah, they have, I have them as potentially finishing out with 65 points, which would be a pretty good run to end the season. That would be them going basically. Oh, that's not what I don't want to do that. I don't know. How did this game actually end? So they basically would finish the season on a 8-1-1 run, which is maybe I'm giving them too much credit. That's not what they're remaining. That would be what they would finish on. They've already won, I believe, 2 games out of that. But their schedule just is not very hard to end the season. Like they finish with the Timbers on the road, but then other than that, it's just not. There's just not a lot of tough games for them. Isn't that? Am I?
No, I think you're right. It's one of those situations where I don't really think that San Diego is necessarily as good as their record. But I also like they've gotten through the difficult part of their schedule already, and they've got an easier run in than maybe the Sounders would like them to if they were hoping to catch them. So I don't think it's out of the question that they're going to fall apart. But
no, and this weekend I think is a big. This game will maybe not tell us a lot because they could probably afford to lose points this weekend. They're playing at San Jose, but that to me is sort of like a bellwether game for them. Where if they beat
Right.
San Jose, it suddenly becomes like they're virtually uncatchable as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think that is. I think that's a fair characterization.
And then the Whitecaps are another team who are going to be a challenge to catch. I think they are. They're on 44 points already, and then they have. They actually don't play San Diego anymore, which is kind of too bad, I suppose, as those things go. But what do you see them? Where's the bellwether games for them?
So I think for Vancouver, they've got some pretty easy home games coming up. Houston, I mean, Houston's not terrible. St. Louis isn't terrible, but those are games that I think a team that has designs on taking a run at the Western Conference should be able to win at home. And I think that people have kind of been waiting for the other shoe to drop for a while with Vancouver. So I think if they can win those fairly easy home games, it's going to be tough for the Sounders to catch them. I think that, this is I don't think Vancouver's as good as their record, but they've played really well this year. They've got a little bit of a cushion. And I think their schedule is a little bit easier than Seattle's. They do have to play Philly at home, which is a tough game. They've got to go across the country to play Orlando. Home game. But yeah, they've got, I think, a little easier run in. And, they've got the Mueller effect, so they might be able to ride that wave a little bit. So they've got to win those easy home games. And I think also Sporting KC on the road is going to be an important game for them because that's a game that they should be able to win if they have designs on making a run at first place. So, yeah, all that said, I think the Sounders are going to catch them, but they could definitely make things a lot tougher if they win, if they win the games they should win.
The most complicating thing for the Whitecaps to me is that they are still alive in the Canadian Championship. They play Forge FC actually tomorrow. And then they have a return leg against Forge, which comes between the home game against Philadelphia and a road game against Sporting Kansas City. And I would think the Whitecaps have traditionally always sort of gone all in on Canadian Championship. They've taken this tournament very seriously. They're the 3-time defending champions. I don't see any reason that they're not going to field essentially first choice groups for those games. So that's maybe a complicating factor, especially since they have to go on the road against Forge tomorrow. So that's going to be a decent little road trip. They have to essentially fly across the country, right? Forge is in Halifax?
Hamilton.
Is that right? Hamilton.
No.
So yeah, that's Hamilton Forge. Okay, there you go. Yeah. I saw that their H was it shows what I know about the Canadian Premier League. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the complicating factor, but they feel like getting to 63 points is sort of what I guessed. Where did you have them?
Yeah, that seems, I mean, yeah, that seems about right. I think I'm a lot less confident though that they're going to hit that mark than I am that San Diego is going to hit theirs. I would say.
I would agree. I would agree.
I like the Whitecaps. I was not as skeptical of them as I think a lot of other people were, although I never thought that they were really serious Shield contenders. I think they have a good team. I just think this pace is a little stronger than they actually are. So I think that there's a pretty good chance that they slip a little in terms of their points per match pace.
Yeah, and then we got Minnesota United, who their run-in is maybe a little, it could be a little bit more complicated. They also have another competition, the Open Cup. I mean, the Sounders also have potentially Leagues Cup, so that's another complicating factor. But for some reason, I think because those games are almost all going to be at home potentially, it makes me a little less worried about it. But anyway, we don't need to get into that. Minnesota, of course, like this game against Minnesota to me is a real. This is going to go a long way to determining whether or not the Sounders can really get into the top three, because if they can catch Minnesota with a game in hand, it just becomes much more of a race. And like their run-in is not easy. There's definitely some complicating games here. Which games catch your eye as being particularly important other than the game against the Sounders this week?
Yeah, obviously that's the big one. The games that, I think Minnesota needs to win. Salt Lake is a tough place to play, but Salt Lake is not very good.
They've been up and down, but yeah.
They've been up and down, but they're 6-5-1 at home this year, so they have been beatable at home. So that's a team that that's a game I think Minnesota should be looking to win if they want to keep pace. Obviously, a win in San Diego would be huge. I don't think that that's a game they should expect to win, but if they could, that really changes the dynamic of things. I think Colorado away is another one where that game, if they win that game, those are points that maybe they aren't necessarily expecting to pick up. And if they get a point in that game and a point at RSL and a point at San Diego, I think it becomes harder to keep up the pace. But they do get to go to LA, which, as we know, is a pretty easy walk in the park kind of game. And then they've got some easy games at home. They've got Kansas City, Chicago at home.
Yeah.
So I think if they can do what's expected at home and maybe sneak some road points they weren't expecting, that's going to make things tougher. But I think of all the teams that we're talking about, Minnesota is the one that I'm most confident of the Sounders' ability to finish ahead of. I wouldn't be shocked if Minnesota ends the season higher in the table, but I think that the Sounders will overtake them at some point.
And I would say there's a good chance they're going to be in the Open Cup final, which would give them an additional game. They're hosting Austin in the semifinals. So that's, that is another complicating factor. And then the real wild card for me, in terms of at least the way it relates to the Sounders, is LAFC, who has 2 games in hand on almost everybody, including the Sounders, and three games in hand.
San Diego, Minnesota.
Right. So they have a lot of games left to play. They don't have any other competitions, which I suppose is good, but they don't exactly have a murderer's row of remaining games either. They're home against San Diego. That's probably that'll be important. They've got a road game against San Jose. What other games jump out at you as being particularly? It's funny, they go back to back against RSL. But anyway, what are the big games as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I mean, their schedule is depressingly pretty easy.
There's a lot of easy home points in here.
Yeah, their road games, they've got to go to New England, Dallas, San Jose, RSL,
Austin,
St.
and
Louis. Austin is their toughest road game remaining, I think, or Colorado, one of the two. That's, man, you would like them to have some tougher challenges to have to live up to on the road. Their home games, they have a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. I think of all 5 of these teams, their schedule might be the easiest. You mentioned the San Diego game, but that's obviously the biggest one. Like, if they win that game and they perform in the other games the way you would expect them to, they might be the favorite to finish first,
to win the West. Yeah,
is very painful to say. But yeah, they've just got to perform how you would expect them to perform against these teams, and they're in really, really good shape to finish, in the top 3, I think.
Well, we won't go through the Sounders' whole schedule, but what I think we both feel like getting to 60 points is about as high as they can realistically go, right?
Yeah, I think they would have to go on a pretty historical run, which they're already kind of on. So they would just have to sustain that for the rest of the way, and really improve on the pace, right? They've got,
and they're going to have.
I look at. Oh, go ahead.
They're going to have Leagues Cup too, which is just another complicating factor.
And right now, the lack of depth isn't hurting them, or not the lack of depth, but the depth being tested isn't hurting them.
Right.
But as we get deeper into the year, maybe that's not as much the case. Maybe they need to rotate a little more often. When you look at the schedule, the games that stand out, obviously Vancouver, Portland, both at home. Those are the biggest ones. And then the Minnesota on the road is obviously a huge game. Everything else is a game that you feel like you should win, save for Miami away. That's the only game.
Yeah, the Miami away game is the only, things happen, but that's the one that feels like you just can't really assume a point in that. You can't just assume points in that one.
I have no expectation of getting anything out of that game. I mean, Miami hasn't been great at home this year. They're 6-2-3, so they've been not quite as good as the Sounders, in fact, but still, I mean, they're, it's definitely the toughest game they still have on the schedule. But all the rest of the games, you look at them and there's really no reason to think in a vacuum Sounders can't win that game. Or the Sounders, even to go a step further, the Sounders wouldn't be expected to win that game outside of Miami and Minnesota, maybe. But you still have to do it. And like you said, stuff happens. They're probably going to drop points against teams they should beat the rest of the way. If not, I mean, if they do, let's say they win all the rest of their home games, they win the road games that you think they have a good chance in. So they won against Minnesota, they win against Austin, they won against NYCFC. That puts them at 24 points, I think. And then let's say they get a point at Miami, even that's 25. If they get,
I mean, that would be an undefeated run, but yes,
it would be an undefeated run. They would have to go undefeated from July onward, but that puts them at 66 points, right? It's
66 points is probably,
that gives you
I'm
a pretty
not
good
going to
shot.
say that's the bare minimum they need to win, but it would probably be a run like that for them to actually win the West.
Right.
Yeah. But all right, well, let's do this. Let's break it down as far as what we think the most likely outcomes are. And we'll start actually at number 6, meaning 5th or worse. What do you think the chance, so what would you start at number 6? What do you think the least likely outcome is?
The least likely outcome is they finish anywhere lower than 5th. I think that they would have to revert to early season, but after Jordan got hurt form for that to really be on the table for me. Because even before they went on this run, they were playing at a much better pace than I think it would take for them to drop below 5th.
Let me just ask you this. Would you, again, these are false choices. We love false choices. Would you take finishing 6th but winning Leagues Cup as an acceptable trade-off? Or that's just a unacceptable outcome is to finish lower than 5th?
I think it's an unacceptable outcome. I mean,
another would mean falling choice, behind the Timbers.
It would
really is what it would mean.
Another false choice too is, would I take finishing 6th and finishing third in the Leagues Cup, because the only thing I care about in Leagues Cup really is, although you do for finishing first, you do get a slightly easier path in the Champions Cup.
You skip a round in the Champions Cup. Yeah. That's true.
And it's a round in which we always lose a guy for for several months. So, but yeah, I don't think I would personally, because I think the odds are pretty good that they're going to beat Puebla and qualify for Champions Cup. And I don't want the end of the season to suck. And if they finish 6th or lower, it's the rest of the way is going to be kind of crappy. So,
yeah. All right. So what do you think is the 5th least likely outcome?
So I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, because we went through a few permutations of this list, but I believe that the 5th least likely outcome is finishing 5th.
That's what we decided. No, I think we 5th. Said. I think we decided that 5th was slightly less likely to happen than 1st.
I think, and I think that's true.
Yeah, I mean that essentially what we're saying is we think there's a good chance they're going to maintain their current position or improve.
Yeah, because the place they are now in the table, 4th place, is including that really bad run of form when they looked like it might be another one of those years. And I just, assuming they don't get significantly more hurt than they are now, which it's always a possibility. I just don't see them reverting to that level of form. It's just hard for me to see, given the way they've played. I don't, like I said earlier, I don't think they're going to keep up this pace specifically the rest of the way, but I think that they are a very good team that's going to continue to play very well. So I just don't see them slipping to that degree.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, the Sounders have been the second best team in the West since early April, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. But I will also say, I think that this is optimistic, right?
Yeah, sure.
I think this is a slightly rose-tinted
state of mind. This is absolutely. I think that's fair. All right. And then number 4.
Savvy listeners will probably have figured out that would be 1st place. It's a very difficult mountain to climb, I think. I think that from 1st place in terms of the outcomes, right? 6, 5, and 4, or worse than 5th and 1st. I think there's a very solid line in terms of probabilities. Like I do not think the Sounders have a good chance of finishing 1st. I am not a bookie, an odds maker, what have you, but I would put the odds of them finishing 1st at lower than 10%, probably.
Yeah, I don't. If looking at the schedules, it feels like getting to 1st requires not just a great run for the Sounders, but it requires some teams to drop points we just don't think are likely to drop.
Multiple teams.
A bunch of teams dropping points. That's the problem.
If they just had to catch San Diego, maybe. But
yeah, but no, I agree with you. All right, so 3rd least likely outcome.
I think that's 4th.
Third most likely outcome.
3rd most likely outcome. I should have written this down. I think that is finishing 3rd.
I thought. Oh, okay.
Sorry, 4th. No, you're right.
Okay,
4th. I said I should have written it down.
I did write it down.
That's where they are now.
Good for us.
And I don't think it's indicative of the performance we can expect the rest of the way. I think that's including kind of the figuring out who they were phase of the season. And I don't see that happening again, barring something unforeseen, which I don't want to speak into existence. But yeah, I think that they're going to finish higher than they are now. I wouldn't be shocked. I think they could still play quite well the rest of the way and end up in 4th. If all it would take would be 2 of the teams ahead of them and LAFC playing well the rest of the way for them to finish in 4th. So I don't think it's a crazy outcome by any stretch, but I do think they're going to move ahead before the end of the year.
Yeah. And so the 2nd most likely outcome you think is?
I think is 3rd. This was a tough one. This was a, or did we say 2nd? I thought we had said 3rd.
I thought we said 2nd, but
Okay. See, it was a tough
Yeah.
discussion.
It was a tough discussion.
Yeah. I think I think you're right. Ultimately, I think it probably is second. Just because I think LAFC is going to rack up a bunch of points. I think that the odds of them finishing first are actually not terrible. Assuming they win the 2 games in hand, they're only 6 points behind San Diego. And they have a really favorable schedule. But I think one of those 2 teams is going to finish first. I feel pretty confident that the Sounders can leapfrog Minnesota and Vancouver. I don't feel confident that they can hold off LAFC necessarily, and I definitely don't think they can catch San Diego. So, so there you go.
Yeah, so that leaves us with where we think the Sounders are going to finish is probably third in the West, which would leave them behind 2 of probably San Diego, Vancouver, and LAFC.
Yeah.
Which feels about right. I would be if the Sounders finish third in the West and qualify for Champions Cup through Leagues Cup, I would consider that a very satisfactory end to this regular season. And I think it puts them in a good position, and it would put them in pretty good position to get to the in the playoffs. That would essentially keep them out of they would keep them off the side of the bracket of whoever wins the West. They would have to potentially visit the second place team in the semi or in the Western Conference semifinals. Unfortunately, finishing third probably means a 3-game series with the Timbers.
Yeah. Which
I don't love, but
I think that how they play against the Timbers at home, if they can finally get that monkey off their back. Now, maybe the playoffs is where we do that now, right? Because that's what it took against LAFC.
Let's not tempt that. Let's take care of business at home against the Timbers, and then take care of business in the playoffs. So that's what we have to do.
But
the Timbers actually
absolutely.
I was gonna say the Timbers have a little bit of a tough run into there's a decent chance they don't finish. They have one of the toughest end of the season schedules. So it's possible they drop below 6, but I wouldn't mind avoiding. I don't really love the idea of playing the Timbers in the playoffs. Although maybe if they thump them at home on the season finale, I'll feel differently.
Yeah, that's fair point. I think with the context of the way the season has gone, in terms of stuff that they couldn't have prevented, Paul Arriola getting hurt, two league games in, Jordan Morris being unavailable for almost that long, all the other injuries they've had. I don't think how, and then also the way they've been playing, right? The run they made in Leagues Cup in the league phase, and then the goals they've been scoring. I mean, all we talked about last year was it's great that they went on this run and have given us something to look forward to in the playoffs, but they still weren't scoring goals, and there was still a lot of dissatisfaction, and there just isn't any of that this year. They are playing lights out. They are playing, I think, objectively fun soccer. Like last year, I was sort of a dissenting voice in saying that, I get that this isn't for a lot of people, but I'm enjoying this. I think everybody that likes soccer likes to watch this kind of soccer. It's a lot of fun. It's great to score a ton of goals, and hopefully the attendance is a lagging indicator for sure. But if the Sounders are going to get a buzz going without making a big major signing, this is a way to do it. This is a way to get the crowds back. It's to play this kind of soccer. So hopefully we see that, over the last couple weeks of summer here. And if we finish third, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, probably a good place to, or that's it. That's our show. We don't have anything else to discuss, but thank you again to all of you for listening. The subscription drive has gone very well. I'll just say we have added about, I think we've netted close to 40 new subscriptions in the month of August, which is great news. We are doing well. I'm very happy, but I also want to encourage anyone, if you're a regular listener to this show, I just really want to encourage you to become at least a $30 a year subscriber. That's the basic level here. That's what I think that's a very good entry point. And I want to urge everyone to do that. $30 a year to help sustain Sounder at Heart is not asking a lot. And so I'll just throw that out there again. But other than that, I want to, of course, say thank you to Full Pull Wines and Hacks and Ferments for sponsoring the show, for sponsoring the Sounder at Heart podcast network, in fact. So that's been awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Lickett, for producing the show. I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Nos Adietis. And remember, you'll never get alone.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.